Well, let's get started. Hello, my name is Doug Bruggeman. I'm with Ecological Services and Markets, and I'm hosting this webinar on conversations on species credits. Thank you so much for logging in. Is my sound okay today? Thank you. All right, so we started this seminar series to provide a platform to discuss successes and barriers in species crediting. I think we all share a strong interest to get these markets working for species recovery and provide a good investment option for the public. So really excited today about the talk put together by Wayne Walker and Tim Baumgartner. The idea is to look at how states are interacting in the public-private partnership space and using North Carolina as an example. So I'm going to turn it over to those guys, but first, please know that we are recording this, and I've been uploading these talks onto YouTube, on YouTube. And so you can just search conversations on species credits and see the past talks. We also have a LinkedIn group. You can log into LinkedIn and join the conversation there as well. And so next month, we're excited to have folks from the state of California discussing their program. So a great way to begin looking at these state programs and learning and making comparisons. So with that, I want to turn things over to Wayne Walker and Tim Baumgartner and take it away. Let me know if you guys need support.
All right. Thanks, Doug. Well, thanks again for everybody joining. As you probably remember, I was a speaker a few months ago, and we've had some challenges with our fee-based program in this part of the country on the lesser prairie chicken, as well as some other species programs over here. So I have my reservations about fee-based programs, as you know, and certainly have concerns about the states running them if they don't have that institutional knowledge on how to design them right. But today we have some great news and a positive thing to talk about. As Doug mentioned, North Carolina has a fee-based program that handles their wetlands and streams. And as a conservation banker, mitigation banker, I would argue it's the most successful model for state-based programs in the country. As you'll see from Tim, it's been around a long time. They did have a bumpy start, but what they've been able to do is turn it around and have a successful public-private partnership with the private sector. And they've gotten a lot of mitigation on the ground, and they've got a lot of responsibly developed projects because of those offsets. So Tim is the executive director of the North Carolina Department of Mitigation Services. And I'm really excited that he gave us some time here to speak to this group. So I'll turn it over to Tim and probably won't be talking anymore until Tim gets done with his presentation. Thanks again for coming.
Thanks, Wayne. Doug, thank you for the invite. Guys, I can't see any video, and I apologize for that. Can you see my first slide as a whole with all the notes?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. So thanks again for the opportunity to speak to y'all. I'm going to leave my video off. Just there's something with bandwidth happening on my end, I guess. As Wayne said, we are an in lieu fee program. We are the largest and the second oldest in lieu fee program in the country. We are water quality based. We are making efforts to go into water quantity type projects. But the things I want to discuss today are sort of basics of some in lieu fee programs that we have found, and we believe they will transcribe no matter what ecosystem service that an in lieu fee might be providing. So I'm going to start a little bit with the overview of a little bit of the history of North Carolina's ILF, what brought on the catalyst of change, the procurement process, pros, cons, and also, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story. So back in the day, early on when our program started, even before our program started in North Carolina, you know, mitigation, water quality mitigation for sure was a very burgeoning industry. Not a lot of people knew what exactly we were doing. That included regulators, that included. So, 96, our ILF program was established as the wetland restoration program. We had a lot of big ideas on plan mitigation and doing a lot of larger projects by collecting fees and putting larger projects on the ground by collecting a number of fees. One of the problems is as we were collecting fees, we had a difficult time of moving things forward, and there was a lot of planning involved, a lot of trying to focus mitigation in the right areas. And from the private sector side, you know, the mitigation banking community and the mitigation providers felt like we were trying to kill them and trying to squash their business. There was a lot of back and forth between our program and the mitigation banking community about how we could move forward and moving forward in the right direction. There was news articles that were posted and
All right, folks. So basically, we were having a lot of problems with trying to move forward in our program. A lot of hand wringing from legislators, private mitigation firms, and trying to move our program forward. But we were having a lot of difficulties. Go ahead to the next slide, Doug. So as we tried to figure out new paths forward, the thought was to change our program and program focus. We became the Ecosystem Enhancement Program. We actually, you know, and probably a wrong move, they started building staff and trying to get more staff on board, thinking that was going to solve the problem. And we were using an approach for procurement called design, bid, build versus using a full delivery approach. I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between these here in just a minute. But just a note on these is as we were going through this process, go ahead and hit click, Doug. It was really exhausting for a lot of us in agencies as well as us and definitely for private mitigation providers. Go ahead. And so in our program, we had a lot of hand wringing over what a private public partnership would look like. And in essence, I think a lot of folks internal to our program thought it would be more of a consumption than it would a partnership itself. Go ahead, Doug. One of the big problems that occurred, we believe, in our program was we focused on a design, bid, build mechanism. And like I said, I'll break these down here in a minute and talk about these individual procurement systems individually. But the main point I want to make of this slide is it was about how much we control our project and rolling the project forward versus relinquishing that control to other entities that maybe have been better suited to make our process go forward. Go ahead. As we begin to come out of this slump and focus ourselves better on more efficiency and doing a better process, we began to release our control of our projects more into the hands of private mitigation providers and doing more purchase of bank credits, as well as primarily focusing our program on a full delivery program type system. Next. And so just a little bit about the full delivery procurement system and why we believe it was so instrumental in moving our program forward. Many people call it a performance-based contracting system because you either perform, produce credits, or basically the provider doesn't get paid. So it's a very good system on our end. A big reason is because it averts a lot of credit risk. The delivery for credits is based solely on the provider, and we see a lot better ecosystem function and performance of these projects as well, because as a state entity, we have a lot of difficulty of moving through processes to get repairs done or different contracting mechanisms that we may have to have. And these private providers can actually perform and move a lot better to address any ecosystem problems, repairs that may come along. I also have a lot of better cost controls using full delivery, where I know going into the project how much this mitigation is going to cost me through the process. And I'm not going to get met with, bills that and things that may crop up in these ecosystem projects that I didn't expect in later years. Go ahead, Doug. And so I just want to break down what, I consider the biggest challenges of ILFs. Timing is one of the huge challenges that ILFs have when it comes to project implementation, permitting, and getting through the permit process. The credit development and the timing it takes to get a conservation easement on the ground, start developing that first credit, get the regulatory approvals for credit development, get the construction crew out there and make those things happen. That timing is very critical. And I know you probably hear a lot of talk with in lieu fee programs, especially in the water quality 404 realm, about meeting the 3-year window for 404 mitigation. And also another ILF challenge is that they are watershed, or in many conservation areas, more habitat specific and centric to project selection. And that is a challenge. It relates back to timing as well, relates back to the focus of where you may get mitigation from. Another big challenge is staffing, and how many staff do you need to keep the program going and focus on the needs to make sure that you are getting the mitigation on the ground. And the other is a huge thing for all of us is the regulatory processes. And what we found out is that each one of these challenges can be alleviated by directing your credit procurement processes in the right manner. Go ahead, Doug. So just a little bit about the different procurement processes that I brought up earlier. A design bid build process in essence, and there's different flavors of this, but the definition of these that we use, I'll just kind of go through it, is basically an ILF would identify a piece of property, go ahead and do whatever protection agreements that need to occur, would hire a designer, hire a construction contractor, hire a monitoring firm. And it seemed like all through this process of design bid build, there was always somebody pointing fingers back at one another. Design build, we've always termed as full delivery light. It may be a situation in which the in lieu fee identified a property and then pretty much put an RFP out for a private mitigation provider to deliver the credits on that property itself. Full delivery, I went through that a little bit earlier, performance-based contracting, and the purchase of bank credits is pretty self-explanatory. Go ahead, Doug. From the design bid build standpoint, one of the pros is, as we spoke about earlier, is the control. And ILF has full control of the project. You have control of every piece of the design, every piece of the construction aspect, and monitoring. A lot of the cons is what I mentioned earlier is the risk. And that risk tends to have a domino effect where you have multiple contractors that point back at each other when things fail. The designer always blames the contractor blames the designer, and the monitoring firm blames everybody. And who ends up paying in the process is the ILF when things go wrong. Next. Design build process is a lot less risk than design bid build. It generally is one contract once you get land acquired. There is some cost certainty because once you contract to that mitigation provider to produce those credits, in the end what it's going to cost for those credits to be produced. And it also requires less in-house staff to manage one of those projects. The con side is the procurement processes within government are difficult to negotiate. So for government ILFs, it's tough to get these government procurement agencies to understand ecosystem services and what it means to actually develop a natural system for mitigation. The original land acquisition sometimes doesn't comport with design. I mean, you could have an idea of what it may be when you go in to do these purchases, but you never know until the design actually gets laid out. We've had those problems in the past as well. And for that reason, that there could end up being higher costs associated with that. You may have to purchase more land, and sometimes you may have to renegotiate contract with the provider in order to accommodate some of those problems. Next. The full delivery process is a faster method of delivering credits, plain and simple. It's a lot lower risk for the ILF itself, and it's one contract, one entity. With a lot of these other processes, there's so many different contracts that an ILF has to deal with. There's always that opportunity for error. There is the cost certainty, as I mentioned earlier, that you know what the costs are going in and what they will be in the future. And you can procure multiple projects with a lot less staff, in my opinion, and where you have very specialized staff that understand the mitigation process, that understand how these projects are built, but in essence, they're managing contracts and managing the processes with the mitigation provider through the regulatory process and approval. You know, one of the cons, and it's a common theme that I'll say throughout procurement, is if it's a government entity, there are difficulties of getting, you know, contract processes through these different departments of administration, or whoever it may be that does approve those contracts for a government entity. And also, when it comes to contract modification, and I'll give you an example for full delivery, is we basically, how full delivery will work is we identify an area that we need mitigation. We'll put a request for proposal out. Provider provides a proposal, a cost proposal, and a technical proposal. Both of those are weighed out. If all things being equal and you know and things are good, then provider gets a contract. We may have needs change from time to time. A project, a particular project may have the opportunity to acquire additional credits. Maybe we ask for 10 acres of wetlands, and this project would actually produce 20, and we actually have that need. A contract modification at that point in time, you know, we can do, but they are kind of onerous and difficult. All right, next. And purchase of bank credits is very negligible risk for us. It's a very quick transaction. We only buy approved release credits, and you know, consistency with watershed or habitat planning frameworks has always been a difficult thing for us on the water quality side for a 404, and I'm assuming it probably would be for species conservation as well. You know, one of the cons that we see is trying to marry up permit with credit and timing. It's a problem we have in the 404 world for sure. And for an ILF, it is an immediate cash outlay. It's something we have to look at business-wise. Is, you know, if we do a full delivery project, I can basically put that cash flow over 10-year time frame. Where if I buy bank credits, it's cash out right now. Next. And so, how do we get to a point of working well together? Next. We adjusted our credit procurement process. Found out that a private sector driven credit delivery is part and parcel the best method and most efficient method in order to deliver credits to our program. It's a faster response to our credit needs. As we have needs that come in the door throughout the year, all we need to do is re-up an RFP and go out and basically make the acquisition for credits, however it may be with full delivery or bank credit purchase. We have less staff. We went from a group, and when we were the ecosystem enhancement program, of about 60, 65 people, and we're running about 28 now. And we are, I would argue, more efficient now than we have ever been throughout any of the processes that we've been through. Our credit procurement process now gives us a lot of risk aversion. You know, with the way we did it back in the day when we were really, you know, at odds with the private community, we had a lot of risk on our program and we suffered from it. Changing our procurement processes has given us a lot more stability financially and being able to make sure that our credits are there for the permit obligations that we have. And our regulatory processes are much smoother too. By having a defined procurement process with full delivery, we know exactly when things are coming due. You know, I know when different tasks are coming in from different providers, and we can gauge that with our regulatory, with our IRT, to ensure that they know when these reviews may be coming up. For example, every, you know, December, we get with our IRT and we plan out the next year, and it really gets us on their clock and on their schedule so that we're not sitting idle waiting for approvals, and it makes it a lot more succinct in getting the mitigation through the process. Next. So what does an effective ILF mean to North Carolina? It means that we have a strong mitigation market by making these adjustments that we've made over the years. Our credit supply is there for permanent impacts. We have a great public-private partnership now that we didn't have before, and our market is driven by our credit fees. So, you know, we have a process now that as we're buying mitigation credits, so our fees adjust on a quarterly or annual basis, depending on how things progress. Next. And so several years ago, our ILF, you know, in all honesty, several years ago, went to one of the mitigation banking conferences, and, you know, I looked around at other ILFs, and honestly, I didn't know any of them, and we didn't have a really good connection to one another. And I got back to North Carolina after that session, and we focused on trying to build a better communication network between NLUP programs. So we do have a SharePoint page propped up now. If there's any ILFs on this call, you know, please contact me and I'll be glad to let you in that. It's an ILF only group. The reason we do that is we want ILFs to speak freely and be able to communicate freely. But I tell you, it's done a lot of help, I think, to individual ILFs, especially young ones, to see where us older ILFs have been, and hopefully learn from some of the mistakes that we had and move, you know, their programs forward in a manner that they don't have to go through some of the struggles that we did. Next. And so again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about something that near and dear in my heart, how we kind of pulled out of a bad situation and really have a great program now. And I'll be glad to take any questions that you have.
So Doug, I'll defer to you to see if you've got any pending questions from the group. I have a couple of questions I can ask Tim, but let's try to get the audience first.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to the chat here. Here we go. Sorry. So Tim Mail commented that the best slide he's seen all week was the alligator plus beaver. So that's a good way to get us started in a light fashion with a very big topic such as this. Are there, you know, it's also possible for you guys to unmute yourself and jump in with questions if you'd like.
Well, while we're waiting for the group to jump in, we've got a lot of smart folks on the phone here. I recognize a few of the names, and some of these folks are mitigation nerds like us, which is great. But that is a great slide. You know, I think it's pretty clear that if you talk to NLUP fee folks and you talk to bankers, a lot of times it's a rocky road to figure out how everybody can work together. And Tim, I know that some of the rockiness happened before you actually were there, but I'm sure you've heard the history. Maybe talk a little bit more about, your view on why do we sometimes see this institutional resistance for some of the younger fee-based programs to admit that, maybe they didn't know everything they thought they knew and there was problems. Sometimes it's better to ask for help than to dig a deeper hole in the foxhole. How did North Carolina overcome that? What was the thing that kind of broke the dam and created the successful model that y'all have now?
Yeah, that's a good question, Wayne. I appreciate it. I think a lot of it boils down to this whole thing I was discussing earlier about control of the process, and relinquishing that control and putting it in the hands of another entity sometimes is a little bit scary and is unnerving. I think that was partial to some of the problems we had here, and we found out that that was leading us down a road to potential bankruptcy at some point. We realized that we needed to change course. The private mitigation community here was more than willing to step in and give us some of the surety and the risk aversion that we needed. And once a lot of ILFs can see that process and see that giving up some of that control does lend to better projects and honestly better credit costs, then I think that then they do move in the direction of going kind of like we've done.
Right. Doug, any other questions from the crowd?
I'm not seeing anything more in the chat, but I love that idea of risk sharing.
There's one from Shauna there. It's like Shauna had a question or chat.
Oh, that's about that. Yeah. So from Shauna Everett, if the NC program started from the beginning as it stands today, would it be as successful?
Say it one more time, I'm sorry.
So if the North Carolina program started from the beginning as it is today, would it be as successful? Like she's asking, did you need the process, or could you start from scratch in a new state and be as successful today?
Well, as much as a lot of us like to talk about the 2008 mitigation rule, honestly, that was, I think, some of the new programs, it gives them some boundaries to start up a program in much the right direction. I think we were making some mistakes before the rule that the rule helped us rectify. So I guess to answer your question, starting out to now, we may make some of the same mistakes as we had in the past. I would hope that we would embrace our private mitigation community a lot more than we did in the past, and not avert some of those problems. I would like to think so anyway.
Great. We do have a hand raised by Tim Mail.
Hey, thanks, Doug, and Tim. Great to hear your presentation. I guess that it's a little bit related to Shauna's question. Like the slide you showed about design bid builds on a spectrum up to banks, and the insights you shared really just on the control side of that insight and perspective from somebody like you, as another sort of a state government colleague or a local government colleague, it would be so valuable to figure out how to share that in more ways. And you had to develop that through, a lot of work, and honestly, you should have, because a lot of those insights were pretty new when you think about, what is our level of tactical engagement on a project based on these different contract types. But I just wanted to give you a little space to talk more about, how much work it still takes to talk through those kind of issues of contracting and level of control with people within the state, within the state bureaucracy. And then if you have any insights on how to package up and share some of that with other people outside of North Carolina, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. I mean, I do know, Tim, of other states that are having a lot of difficulty right now with getting through their procurement agencies. From the start, for us, we had to go to our department administration that is very good at, acquiring pens and pencils and, building buildings. But ecosystem services was just they just could not wrap their hand around. For example, in design bid build land, we had to use their documents to in construction to document different levels and different processes that of completion and construction. On that form, we had to fill out, well, is there an elevator? Is there, what is the room size and that sort of thing. So, just the individual documents we had to use with our procurement agency was just irrelevant to doing the kind of work we're doing. How to break that down to other states? We're trying to do that a little bit now with our ILF communications group, and when they prop up and have difficulties, and we've made ourselves available to have those discussions. I know Kentucky has been of interest of late, and we've had discussions with those guys about how to move forward and provide them some of our contract language, and hoping that using some of the examples we've got would help free up some of their problems. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. We don't have another question in the chat. If I would like to invite folks, if they'd like to unmute yourself and jump in, that'd be great. I guess I'll jump in then, if you don't mind, Tim. And so there's the issue of sharing risk. And I think for species, there is such risk in terms of habitat management. How do we, for a lot of species, we don't even know how to create habitat or manage habitat. I just wonder if there are ways to take what you've learned in North Carolina and apply that to some other species that we're struggling to start a credit market for. And so this is a general comment, and I'm putting it out as a broad question. Maybe somebody would jump in on that, but I just wanted to offer that question.
Well, I mean, the beauty of full delivery, Doug, is that if you define it, they will come. If the ILF can define what they want in whatever parameters that may be, I feel like the private mitigation community can identify it, and and as long as there is a task-oriented delivery system that gives enough flexibility for that contracting process to work, then I think it can translate, no matter what. We're looking at translating our water quality program, if you will, over to a water quantity, and doing some of the same unknowns that you guys may have in the species world, where we have to develop a model that would give us an output of what would be the end result. We're going to use like an acre foot of water holding as a criteria, but how do you consistently develop what an acre foot looks like? Compensatory mitigation, we've got that all day long. We've got credit ratios and all that. Especially doing a new crediting system. I guess what I'm saying is breaking it down piece by piece and defining that in an RP process. I think it can translate no matter what the ecosystem is.
Great, that's a great perspective. Thank you.
And just to follow on with my perspective on that, where we've seen some of the species markets be successful is you have two very fundamental things that often don't get done. One, you define the mitigation standard, typically through species-specific guidance up front, prior to a listing, ideally, or early in a listing, if you're not having much participation in voluntary markets. And then you connect that standard to whatever permitting vehicle is being used by industry, whether it's an HCP, a 4D rule, a CCAA. I mean, you have to have one of those things connect to the other in order for there to be a market that has equivalency, so the private sector will come. And once you have that, then they'll come. And the benefit of that is, you have lots of providers, you get some price discovery, B, everybody's competing to the same standards. So, the resource is going to get the benefit of whoever, the ILF contracts with. And for the ILF, as Doug said, you're shifting the risk of performance away from the administrator onto the private sector provider. So if a private sector mitigation provider defaults, doesn't meet their performance criteria, you don't bring the whole inland fee program down.
Great. Okay, folks, would love to hear more. I know we have a lot of experienced folks on the call, and just opening it up for more comments.
Come on, group. There's smart minds out there.
Well, I guess I'll just ask a broad question. And, there's folks from all over the U.S. here. But I'm just thinking, is there anything that we can do to get, other states to jump in? We have California and Florida that are kind of leaders in this area. And it seems like it takes, I guess, state legislative leadership to get this done. And so one thing, I guess, for the group to think about is how to start having those conversations in your states. And, who do you talk to? And I don't know, just some broad perspective to keep the conversation going. Again, opening it up for other comments. All right, guys. So I guess you're welcome to email us. Wayne, do you have a comment?
I just had one more question, Doug, and then I'm done, and hopefully the folks on the phone will be able to take the presentation and share it with their respective states, because as we heard, there's several states struggling with this and other regional state efforts, and valuable lessons learned here. My last question is, Tim, if you could speak about, from a pricing and kind of conservation outcome perspective, what are you seeing with, paying market-based prices for conservation or in case mitigation from both the, developers of say the, whatever development they're building, housing developments, whatever, highways, their perspective in terms of when they discover that price transparent, that the price discovery, like what sort of action are you seeing in terms of any sort of avoidance minimization? And then on the conservation side, where the mitigation provider is, I guess, in North Carolina, typically working with a private landowner partner, like how are you seeing the landowner's view towards these natural resources and these ecosystems versus before they may have partnered with a private sector conservation provider?
Yeah, I think from the permit applicant side, you're seeing a lot of applicants start looking at alternative methods to do what they need to do, whether it's alternative designs through their impact or what it may be, and therefore you may see, because of some of the costs for doing mitigation, you may see less impacts. On the flip side, the cost of having a very stable program, allows, whichever way it goes, that that entity, the ILF or bank, to have the credits and being able to develop and make sure either way the resource is taken care of. You mentioned something from the landowner side too. I think a lot of landowners are seeing this as an opportunity for land that they would not otherwise be utilizing for farming or whatever it may be, to have another commodity they can actually sell and gain some revenue off of. So I think it's a win all the way around, and either way it shakes out to protecting the protecting the species, protecting the resource, whatever it may be.
Thank you.
Great. Well, that seems like a great place to end. I want to thank Tim for that great presentation, talking about some fundamental structural pieces that have succeeded. And I want to thank Wayne for bringing the idea together to juxtapose with species. And it's just critical that we start bringing more of these ideas together. And so, again, this is going to be recorded and put onto the YouTube. And I'll send that out with the next invitation for next month, which will focus the next 2 months. We will be focusing on California, and great way to start comparing programs, and look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, guys. Sorry about the difficulties. Glad we got through it.
My apologies here too. Thanks, Tim.